Welcome, Andrew Ridgie, from the New York Hospitality Alliance, and my dear friend, to Latino Victory's Substack. We have an important topic today, so I'm excited to hear from you. What's going on with the hospitality industry, which we know impacts millions of Latinos and frankly, our entire population? Because who doesn't love or enjoy good food, good company? Our culture is very much rooted on the many industries that you represent. So I'm excited to have you. For those folks who might not be familiar with your work, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work of the Hospitality Alliance?
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for all the work you and your team does. It is as critical as ever. Yeah, I run an organization called the New York City Hospitality Alliance. We are a not-for-profit association that represents restaurants, bars, nightclubs, and the greater hospitality industry across the five boroughs of New York City. So our prime mission is to be an advocate, make sure that we represent these small business owners in the halls of government, whether it's at a city, state, or federal level. Give them a united voice advocating on laws, regulations, policies that impact their business, both positively and negatively. Also, providing them a lot of education and training, everything from employment law compliance and food safety compliance to, how restaurants and bars are using technology to improve their business operations. We host trade shows and conferences and cocktail receptions, which you've been to unite the industry and make sure we have a collective voice representing our perspective and our interests.
I appreciate that, Andrew. And throughout the entire time that we've known each other, I've always seen the work that you do also in organizing restaurant workers and every segment of the industry around the issues that matter. So, in this moment, I'm curious, what are some of the challenges that you see for the industry? What keeps you up at night?
Oh, what doesn't keep us up, these nights? I think just before we get into some of the kind of immigration and workforce issues, the restaurant business is a tough business. People in this industry work nights, weekends, holidays, when many people are going out to enjoy a meal at a restaurant. Our industry is there running the business in the kitchens, on the restaurant floor, serving guests. Um, and there's always fires and different issues to deal with. First, we're consumer facing, so we're dealing with the public. Some customers are wonderful, others, can be a challenge. But we're in the business of providing hospitality, service, great meals, great experiences. But when it comes to permitting and licensing and rent and workforce management, the restaurant industry, which kind of gets into the idea of immigration as well, is we employ people from all walks of life. One of the amazing things about our industry is you could have some big fancy degree, or you could have, no to little education at all, maybe not even speak English, but you can find jobs and opportunity in the restaurant industry. And we need to be advocating for, fighting for, and supporting many of these people, all of them who are the backbone of our industry because they bring their cultures from their countries and prepare it for us in our restaurants, serve it to us, and are so important, not just to the economic foundation of our city, state, and nation, but also that social and cultural fabric. And I think many people, directly to your question, in our industry are very concerned about what's happening with immigration, what's happening with workforce issues, because it has such a direct impact on our industry. So there are a lot of concerns. That's keeping a lot of people up at night. And it's something that we all collectively need to navigate together because we need to do better. We need our country to do better.
Thank you for sharing that. And you touched on immigration, and we know also we want to talk about workforce issues. But, you know, as it relates to immigration, what have you seen in restaurants? Are workers afraid to come to work? Are patrons afraid to dine out? I know, for example, in Washington, D.C., with the militarization of the city, a lot of folks just didn't want to be out and about at a time where they understood they were, military forces, uh, potentially picking up folks off the street. Um, so, what have you seen? Are restaurants feeling the struggle in this way? Um, and what do we do about it?
Yeah, I think the short answer is both. I'd say there's 3 different segments. I think there are the restaurant owners that have various, legal obligations, but then also have, when it comes to workforce issues. So they're trying to navigate what their legal responsibilities are, what their liabilities are, how they can follow the law under city, state, and federal laws, which are all different and complex. You also then have what they believe to be their moral responsibility to people who work for them in the restaurants, many of whom maybe worked there for years, and by extension, their families, and that's something that can be difficult and complex, you know, to navigate. And then you have people that also are going out to restaurants, and I think everyone's been. So if you are an employer, you have concerns about your responsibility to the laws, but also responsibilities to the people you employ. If you are working in the industry with so much of the rhetoric, so much of the actions, you could be fearful to go into work. And that um, spreads through, communities. I've heard of situations where there's not even a situation occurring, but a rumor occurs, and it really sends shockwaves and fears about whether people want to go to work, they don't, whether they should bring their kids to school. There can be a lot of complexities. And then I've heard in certain neighborhoods where you've had issues, getting to your point, is just people may not want to go out and spend too much time in public going out to dine. So we've really heard from those 3 different, the restaurant owners and operators, the restaurant workers, and the people going out to restaurants, that in similar but also different ways, there's concern and fear and uncertainty.
For sure. And I would add another segment, and you tell me if
Mm,
this is something that you've seen, which is really the food supply chain.
yes.
Have you seen any disruptions there? And what kind of accommodations are folks within the hospitality industry making in order to address any food supply concerns?
Here and there, I haven't heard of anything widespread yet when it comes to food distribution. That's not to say that it hasn't happened. I may just not be familiar. But there is a direct link and nexus between the people who are growing and preparing the foods and the products, often the people that are delivering that food and those products, and the people that are preparing, cooking, and serving that. So you have from, growing to preparing and serving this whole link of folks that are essential to the food chain. And if there are disruptions, it has significant implications and consequences that are all negative um, on society as a whole. I mean, we rely on people who work in all of these different parts, from growing, being on the farms, to picking and delivering, to cooking in the restaurants, and then serving to your table for our food supply. And if that's disrupted, people aren't going to be getting their food. So there's that issue. There's the economic issue, which is absolutely crucial. Um, so even if people feel like they're unaffected directly by the workforce and immigration issues, everybody eats, has some connection to food, and their lives can be disrupted.
For sure. And I feel in some degree it has also created activism from the grassroots perspective,
Yeah.
for workers as well as owners. So what have you seen in terms of that? Do you feel that folks are a little bit more conscious of what the political climate uh, could do in terms of an impact on the industry? Have folks come to you and said, "What can we do? What are we doing?" Um,
Yes.
what's the activation look like from the grassroots perspective?
Yeah, I think and I see not just here locally in New York City, but across the country that there's been activation. People are getting organized, they're advocating, they're lobbying, they're speaking with their government officials, and they're explaining the reality of this issue that workforce that powers our food sector, which is from the farmers to the restaurants and everything in between, is essential to the health of our nation, the economy of our and they are letting their government officials know that this isn't some, kind of, political it shouldn't be some political hot button. This is an essential issue to the economy and the food distribution system of the United States of America. And I'm hoping that as more of our government officials hear that from their constituents in their districts across the country, they're going to understand this is not about being a Democrat or being a Republican. This is about being an American. This is about being people who come to this country for opportunity, that want to contribute, and they're part of the population whom we're going to look back in another 10, 20 years and be like, oh my goodness, like, what would we do without them? It's a shame. I think about, I mean, even going back to my great grandparents that had to flee, Eastern Europe in crisis and being persecuted, came here with nothing, made something, worked hard, worked in the restaurant industry, the food service industry, um, and unfortunately, many of them had to face a lot of challenges upon their arrival. And it's a shame that this many generations later, folks that are arriving or have been here are still dealing with very, very similar issues. So I just think we need to get better as a country and recognize this is a human issue, and humans come to America from all different places for very similar reasons, and we'd be better off if we embrace them.
I appreciate that you say that because we don't say it enough, and it's always, as someone who came to this country as an immigrant myself, it's something that I always try to hone in on, right? In terms of what every immigrant has as its hopes, dreams, and aspirations is really what every American has as its hopes, dreams, and aspirations. We want a better future for ourselves and our families, economic opportunity, it- and really, the fact is that we've been able to build intersectionality between many of our groups based on those concepts. Because the bottom line is, we have much more in common that we have as differences. So let me ask you on that. Have you been able, do you find that in this moment also you've been able to do more coalition building with other partners? Are folks reaching out to you to say advocate for better visa requirements or more tax credits? Or how is that working out within your industry?
Yeah, we've spoken with so many different people. Many people from different sectors have reached out. I'd say, I mean, for the obvious reasons, closest communication that are people within the hospitality space and that chain. So you mentioned farm workers, farms. There's that direct, nexus. But there are certainly other companies. When you think about the average restaurant and all the different vendors that they're buying different products from, different services from, um, they all have a stake in this issue. So I think it is bringing people across all different lines, all different sectors to the table. And listen, I think the restaurant industry really has an obligation to help lead this charge, because what are we talking about? A table. What do you do at a table? People come together. people love food. They love the culture in which we engage over that food. So I say everyone should just get together around one big table. We could have differences. You could debate it, fight it out. But at the end of the day, I think we have to recognize what we all know and maybe just remind ourselves again in so many ways what this country was founded upon. It was bringing people from all different countries seeking better lives for them and their families, have an opportunity here. And unfortunately, for so many decades now, I've been doing this. There just has not been the proper reforms and systems in place to allow people to come here. And now we have this crisis where people just sit on different TV stations and yell back and forth about everything they disagree about instead of sitting together in person at a table over a great meal talking about all the things that we have in common and why our economy and our country and our cultures all depend on us making wise decisions and knowing and understanding what we know. Immigrants are the backbone of the restaurant industry and so many other sectors. And we need a workforce that's here, willing to work, wants to contribute. And that's what I see. All good. Yeah, there's some challenges and complexities to figure out. That's with everything. But the underlying notion is strong.
And so if you were going, and I'm sure you've done this in many occasions,
Mhm.
just if you were going to speak to a restaurant worker or a business owner who in this moment is concerned about the national dialogue and the talking heads on TV and what's going to happen next, what do you actually tell them?
Well, listen, it depends on the situation. Everyone comes with, a different place of what their specific issue is. But I think the big thing that I recognize just from organizing, and I think you do a lot of similar work, is, you have to show up, you have to be part of the process because if not you, then who? And everyone can contribute in different ways. You can join these coalitions and you can meet with government officials. Other people have financial resources. Other people may have connections in other states where the issue of workforce and work visas and immigration, is looked at maybe less favorable. But because they're located in one of those neighborhoods, maybe they have those connections and be able to connect differently. If I'm, if I'm from New York City and I'm just talking to a government official and, I don't know, a Republican state, they may just be like, oh, what does this New York City guy know what he's talking about? But if they're talking to, a local farmer or somebody that contributes and their community relies on, I think it's a more powerful message. So I think there's a lot of different ways for different people to be involved and advocate, and you need to just figure out what capacity that is. For some people, like I said, it's attending a meeting. Another, it's sending a message to your government official. For someone else, it's writing a check to support an organization that's advocating. For another person, it could be going on TV and talking about these issues. It's meeting people where they are and figuring out a way that they can advocate not only for themselves, but the greater community that all seeks a better outcome.
For sure. And at the end of the day, that's how we rebuild trust, right? With
Hmm.
with folks who perhaps electorally are disenchanted with who the candidates were last year or how politics works or the fact that our country seems so fractured. So there's lots of folks who basically disengaged, right? They're either in one corner or the other of the ring. Um, to use a lucha libre term, right?
Hmm.
Um, but they don't meet halfway. And then for the folks that are somewhere in between, what we call disaffected voters, they stay home. So to the extent that there's going to be the midterm elections next year
Hmm.
and a determination, frankly, of who will control the House of Representatives. We're in the midst of a government shutdown. Um, what is the organizing that's happening within the hospitality industry electorally beyond the work that you're doing lobbying for policies,
Yeah,
if any?
I mean, I think what's happening now is I think that there are communities across the country in all different type of politically leaning places having conversations about the importance of this issue, and there needs to be some sort of sensible reform. And what is sensible reform may be different to different people, but I think what I at least tried to hit home is this is an economic issue. Yes, it's a moral issue. Unfortunately, not everyone's going to care about that. I think they should, but there are enormous economic factors at play here about the tax base that helps support all of our nation, states, cities, essential services. And there's also the reality of growing food, preparing food, delivering food, serving food, and it relies on a large immigrant population. And if you were to just, not that you could, but get everyone out of this country, like some people say, there would be a collapse. It would collapse. People would not get their food. Food prices would skyrocket. Um, so I think these the types of messages that I've been hearing people communicate. I hope in areas where I'm not hearing about it, they are communicating it. But that's the most important thing, that you just got to keep persevering, advocating, um, and yeah, just it's a you have to be relentless, you know. And
Not to
and
quote,
sometimes I don't even wanna say, like, I don't wanna say foolishly optimistic because it's been so bad, like, for so long right now, the situation, but, you always have to know deep down, even if it doesn't seem possible, that, it is possible for change. It is possible for things, to get better, but it just doesn't happen if people don't advocate and aren't part of the process.
And it is possible. And for us here at Latino Victory, that's the work that we do every single day, trying to engage our community in a meaningful way, and others, right? So build those intersectional coalitions so that we can continue to build a better democracy. So I want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to help communicate with some of our folks here on Substack. I know it's a new platform for you. It also is for us in some ways. So we're continuing to grow. And for those who joined a little bit late, this is Catherine Pichardo, President and CEO at Latino Victory, an organization focused on building Latino political power so that our voices and values are reflected in the policies that move our country forward. And we're joined by Andrew Rigi, who is leading the charge at the New York City Hospitality Alliance, and who was able to provide a lot of good information. Thank you, Andrew, on how the hospitality industry is faring in this moment that we find ourselves here in America. And yes, we have to be relentless. So I look forward to continuing the conversation. I thank everyone for joining, and seguimos en la lucha. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
That's it.
Bye bye.